From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Mesh breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
Welcome into the latest edition of Cleats and Sneaks, the podcast where we talk about everything from NFL to the NBA. I'm your host, James Mesh. Do want to remind you, don't forget to like on this video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. And also don't forget to turn on that notification bell. That way you get notified every time we upload any one of our podcasts, not just this one. We have other ones like Four Tire Change with Dawson Isolo and even the Miguez Mindset with, of course, Matt Miguez. Let's get right into it. And of course, we're wondering, there's a little bit of a lull right now in the NFL right now. So let's look at the NBA because there's been a little bit of a pause in the action, but there was also stuff going on during the weekend. Of course, it was All-Star Weekend. And we had started off right away with the celebrity game. It's always interesting to me to see who really appears in this game because there's always different guys that come in, or even gals as well. Whether it's former NBA players, celebrities, show hosts, maybe even we got a Instagram or TikTok influencer. Maybe they pop up as well. And we saw quite a bit of that, of course. We saw streamer Kai Cenat pop up in the game, as well as T-Jazz. He's a basketball influencer. You could tell he really took the game serious with how he was playing last night. And he's got a crazy layup package if you've ever seen anything that he's done on any one of your social media accounts. Of course, there was also NFL players that had played in the game as well. You had C.J. Stroud, you had Puka Nacua, and then you even had edge rusher for the Dallas Cowboys, Micah Parsons, play in the game. And it's crazy to see the difference in the size of those guys compared to normal people. Like, Puka kind of looked like just a normal average NBA player because of his height and weight. But then because of how big Micah Parsons is compared to other guys, like even C.J. Stroud, he's no small guy, but he looked a little bit smaller compared to the big edge rusher, Micah Parsons. But then, of course, Kai Cenat looked like an absolute shrimp. He didn't play a lot, but it was always cool to see those types of guys and gals play in the game. And even then, there was a new addition to that game for All-Star Weekend for the celebrity game. They did a crunch time button where you got about 2 minutes or so. So where if you were able to make some shots, you were able to get double the points for it. Just something new to try and spice up the game, because I know that it's kind of the same thing between them and what the NFL does with their Pro Bowl week as well, where you're trying to come up with new things because the way the teams and players are nowadays, they're not trying to get hurt, so they're not taking this stuff super, super serious. And it's not like there's a huge cash grab for them to be able to be influenced and be motivated by. So it's kind of become washed in a sense. So the fact that they're trying new things is cool and all, but the execution always isn't the best. What was always interesting to me, however, because I've always been a three-point type shooter, was the three-point contest. And it was pretty interesting. The fact that even in the first round, 26s went pretty wild. It felt like every single person made a 26 at one point or another in this year's contest. Of course, not everyone did, but vast majority of them did. And you had to see it quite a few times. And we had to do an overtime round to see who was going to make it to that next round to eventually find out who's going to be the three-point champion for the 2024 All-Star Weekend. And eventually we found out who it was. It was Damian Lillard for the Milwaukee Bucks, as he now goes back-to-back for that championship. And it was interesting because Karl Anthony Towns, during the first round of it all, he had his foot on the line. So should he even have made it past the first round to begin with? All of his toes, almost half of his foot was over the three-point line. The fact that we kept counting it, and there was a ref right there, and he just let it go. Little interesting. Shows to me how much people are actually really caring about the All-Star Weekend. I know they try to make it a spectacle, but because the players and even the guys reffing to make sure that everything is in line, no one's really caring all that much. It's unfortunate, but it is interesting if you're going to look at it in bite-sized pieces for a social media sense. But then the really specific three-point contest that was interesting to me was the new one, a special edition. Steph Curry, always renowned as the best three-point shooter of all time. He takes on the best shooter right now in the WNBA, Sabrina Ionescu. That was a very interesting one because they also played for their own specific charities. It was a cool event to be able to see, and I'm glad that they were able to do it. And it really lived up to the billing in my eyes. Ionescu, she had made 26 herself. Weird how that number keeps popping up once again. And she shot from NBA range, but used a WNBA size ball, which is completely understandable to me because she already shoots from that far anyway. She doesn't have to shoot closer to the goal. Because of her range, she's completely fine and completely normal to the sense of shooting from NBA range. So I had completely no issue with that as well. But Steph rebutted himself and he finished off with a 29 and became the GOAT three-point shooter in a sense. Then we move on to Sunday's game, and man, this one is what people were really talking about because the All-Star game has been very sour as of late. Players are not trying, and you can see it in a sense. The East won 211 to 186. That's right, 397 total points in an NBA scrimmage type of game. There's 289 total shots and 168 three-pointers taken. You could just tell that there was no effort. No one really cared. I mean, we've seen it before over and over again. I'm a Boston Celtics fan, and it really annoyed me in a previous year when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, in the middle of the game, went for a 1v1 for a couple of times. Back and forth possessions while everybody else just sits off to the side. I think that's terrible. No one wants to see that type of action. The fact that we're airing this and we're allowing it to happen is utterly ridiculous. You see a couple of cute things here and there, like the white chocolate pass by Tyrese Halliburton. That was cool to see. But overall, the emphasis on the game and people actually taking care of it in a sense and actually wanting it to be a good quality game for the viewers and for the people there live at the game, it just wasn't there. It's unfortunate, and it's become the Pro Bowl in a sense because no one's taking it serious. And they need to make some sort of changes. I wish I had the answer to it, but for right now, I'm just glad that they're at least trying to do something new to spice it up. Moving on to other NBA news, more in the coaching sense, the Brooklyn Nets have decided to fire their coach Jacques Vaughn. Now, their GM, he had explained that Vaughn wasn't giving enough energy and there wasn't enough effort. Weird how that's a reoccurring theme with this type of sense when it comes to the NBA. One's for the All-Star game and All-Star weekend and its festivities. And now we've got coaches who weren't showing enough energy or effort towards the team and practices. And you can see it as they've lost 18 of their last 24 games before they got to the break. Other news, however, was with Doc Rivers because he recently on Sirius XM NBA, he had explained that he was actually kind of confused on why the Milwaukee Bucks had called him to coach their organization, which is weird to me. And don't get me wrong, I've looked at this since, and the fact that they're 3-7 with him in Milwaukee, it's a little concerning, but it's also very difficult to be able to come into an organization whenever you weren't previously employed and you're in the middle of a season and now you have to take over this team that had just fired their coach. That's not an easy task to do because you've probably got a different personality and a different way of doing things and how you run your team compared to what the previous coach had done. Now, it was interesting because his former player, JJ Redick, he's become a member of NBA media as of late, and he had criticized Rivers, saying that he's always got excuses. But then even another previous player, Austin Rivers, he clapped back at JJ Redick, saying that, dude, those are your best years. Now, it is kind of interesting because if you look at the statistics, that doesn't really feel like it's the case, so I can't really fully side with guys like Austin Rivers saying stuff like that. But it is interesting because is there some bad blood between Doc Rivers and JJ Redick that hasn't really been made yet and it's just finally boiled over from JJ Redick's side? He just couldn't let it stay in anymore. He had to let it out. It's interesting to see. Now, I think whenever you're going to get a new coach in the middle of the season, that is never a good sign, especially when it's a first-year coach that you had coming in for your team. The fact that you're now going to another guy And even if it is Doc Rivers, who has an NBA championship, he's had success at different places. There's oftentimes been where his teams that he's coached, they have underperformed or they've given up leads in the playoffs and they've ultimately been eliminated and underachieved on what we had expected that they could do. The fact that they are having a new coach and that new coach is someone that is underperformed and undercoached and their teams have underperformed compared to the expectations that they had. I worry for the Milwaukee Bucks when it comes to the long term once we get into the playoffs. It's not to say that they are a bottom feeder in the NBA, but the fact that they're 35-21 right now and they're 3-7 with Doc Rivers as their new coach, not a good sign. Not looking good for them. They'd have to make a huge turnaround if they want to be able to be serious contenders to represent the East in the NBA Finals. And then quickly looking at the NBA standings as of right now, we've had a little bit of a break to see where we're at, but now that we're here tonight, we finally are able to get some more NBA action. Full slate of games coming up tonight and over the weekend. But looking at it right now, of course, the Boston Celtics are still leading the East by at least 6 games right now. They're 43-12 with the 1 seed. The next closest are the Cleveland Cavaliers at 36-17. Milwaukee still with that weird selection right now. They are still the 3rd seed at 35-21. Miami's still kind of hanging in right there. They're the 7th seed at 30-25. While looking at it, Minnesota is still leading the West at 39-16. While Oklahoma City, they had dropped down to the 2 seed, but they're not too far behind. Only a game and a half back at 37-17. LA Clippers, specifically 36-17, 3 seed. But the LA Lakers themselves are still the 9 seed, 9.5 games back of where Minnesota is. And then the Golden State Warriors, it's not looking good for them, but it is interesting that they're still in that bubble at the 10 seed at 27-26. And looking at the slate of games we have tonight, we have a big one. 12 games. Of course, the Celtics are going to the Bulls. The Rockets will have to travel to go play the New Orleans Pelicans. The Cleveland Cavaliers are hosting the Orlando Magic. One interesting matchup tonight, though, is the New York Knicks against the Philadelphia 76ers, while the Suns will have to go travel to play the Mavs, the Thunder, and the Clippers. That's another interesting one. That'll be tipping off at 7 o'clock tonight. While for the Warriors and Lakers, they play once again. That's going to be the late night game at 9 o'clock on TNT. And the final game that'll tip off at 9 o'clock, Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs will travel to Sacramento to play the Kings. Tip off late. Sacramento is a 10.5 point favorite in that one. And then quickly looking over to the NFL right now, plenty of coaching changes specifically for these New Orleans Saints. Of course, getting Clint Kubiak and also signing quite a few different guys like Keith Williams to be their wide receiver coach. But we'll get to that in a later episode. For right now, one thing that's really been interesting and that has been of note as of late has been Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields. He had recently unfollowed the Chicago Bears Instagram account, and people were questioning it, wondering, okay, well, does this ultimately mean that Caleb Williams is going to be the next Bears quarterback, as they do have the number 1 overall pick in this 2024 NFL draft? And he actually went on the St. Brown Brothers podcast, the 33rd team, and they just straight up asked him, like, what's up with that? And he had explained that people are kind of taking it a little too serious. They're looking too much into it. He didn't want to have any sort of football on his timeline. He actually even unfollowed the NFL as well. And look, he had a pretty interesting quote as well, because he had said, just because you don't follow the girl on IG, don't mean you're not messing with her. Which is completely understandable in a sense. And I do think that people take stuff like that a little too much out of context and put too much emphasis on it. And I totally get Justin. You kind of want to have a total reset. But he did also say that he's looking for them to be able to figure it out soon, because he doesn't want to be in limbo. He wants to know, are you going to be committed to me? Chicago, are you committed to me as your quarterback of the future? Or are you going to move on? Because if you're going to move on, let's move on now, which is completely understandable from his sense. But at the end of the day, it is a business, and the Bears need to do what is best and figure out what's best for them as an organization moving forward, whether it is with Justin at quarterback or whether it's with someone else. That'll be it from us here in the studios. Appreciate you listening in once again. Don't forget to like this video, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell every time we upload any one of our podcasts and any one of our media, because we don't do just podcasts here. We, of course, also give you post-game interviews from our local teams like the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, LSU Tigers, New Orleans Saints when they're finally in season again, and so much more. But until then, I'm James Mesh. Appreciate you tuning in, and come back for the next video next week when we look more into the NFL and what's going on with the latest in the NBA.